from the Mercy One studio. Making It Personal with Bishop William Joensen on Iowa Catholic Radio and iowacatholicradio.com.
Welcome to Making It Personal with Bishop Joensen. I'm Kelly Mesher-Collins with the Diocese of Des Moines. On today's show, we're visiting with Tom Chapman, Executive Director of the Iowa Catholic Conference, to talk about the legislative priorities of the bishops of Iowa and more. But before we get to today's interview, let's find out what's on the bishop's mind.
Good morning, Kelly.
Good morning.
On a crisp Iowa January day
right.
and everything, a special day in our country as we observe a National Day of Prayer for the observance of the legal protection of unborn children, 48th anniversary of the Roe v. Wade decision. And so we lift up all life, and I think some of our conversation with Tom Chapman will involve various aspects of the defense of human life and promoting a culture of life, not only for the unborn, but for all persons and the dignity that all possess. But had some chance for spiritual renewal, as you know. I made a retreat a few weeks ago. I'm grateful to Mother Rebecca Stromowski, the Trappistines of Our Lady of the Mississippi Abbey, who allowed me to be with them, and had my own kind of retreat space, but joining with them in their choral office. It's kind of unique when you hear them, I guess some Trappist monasteries do not sing the so-called cursing or imprecatory psalms, but these good ladies do. So once in a while, when they get into psalms like Psalm 109, singing this with their angelic voices and things, but may their guilt always be before the Lord, their memory banished from the earth. He loved cursing, may it come upon him. He hated blessing, may none come to him. And so I think, the kind of strong medicine, but, and yet these are part of sacred scripture, and I wonder if maybe we turn some of our anger or feelings of being falsely accused at times, turn to the Lord in that, and let the Lord receive our sighs, our groans, our anger, if that might transform some of our culture and the toxic tendencies that we sometimes have as well. So, again, I'm grateful, and did a little labora with my aura there as well, trying to complete an essay that I promised the Institute for Priestly Formation. We all love deadlines, nothing like concentrating as well, but grateful for that, and then the chance to connect with some friends and things as well. So hopefully we're ready for the next chapter here of what God has in store as well. But I think, as we think about, the spirit that God gives us, the ability that we each should have to discern, that life should be protected, regardless of our religious commitments as well. The law that God puts in our minds and hearts, as he says in the 8th chapter of Hebrews, I will be their God, and they shall be my people, and they shall not teach each one his fellow citizen and kin, saying, know the Lord, for all shall know me from least to greatest. So that kind of innate human capacity that we have to know God's law and the protection of all persons in that particular way. So obviously the transition in our federal government this week, the inauguration, those hallowed rituals that we have that were observed obviously with a lot of protection. So I think, at least our sense of the republic continues, the wisdom of the founders, and that we can now maybe begin a new chapter. Grateful to Archbishop Gomez of the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, the president of that, who is now we have President Biden, himself a Catholic, first time since President Kennedy, over 60 years to have that. And so he did reach out on behalf of the USCCB and just pledged his congratulations and desire to cooperate as always. He did not speak, in trying to prescribe partisan views, but in accord with the faithful citizenship document, which we've referred to before the election as well, the various issues that are a wide range of concerns, some of which there might be automatic touch points with the new administration, and others, obviously, for which there's tension. But I think he spoke as a pastor on behalf of all the nation's Catholic pastors and bishops in this way, reaching out on principled basis, not on partisan basis, to love moral principles that lead to prudential judgments that don't align with political categories of left or right or the platforms of the two major political parties. We work with every president and every Congress. On some issues, we find ourselves more on the side of Democrats, while on others, we find ourselves standing with Republicans. Our priorities are never partisan. We are Catholics first, seeking only to follow Jesus Christ faithfully and to advance his vision for human fraternity and community. So I think that'll kind of set the table a little bit for our conversation with Tom Chapman and what we're doing on the state level.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we return, we'll welcome Tom Chapman, Executive Director of the Iowa Catholic Conference. You're listening to Making It Personal with Bishop Joensen on Iowa Catholic Radio and the Spirit Catholic Radio Network.
Thank you, Blessman International, for their support of Iowa Catholic Radio. Everyone lives their life 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. How we use that time directly affects if our life will leave a significant impact or not. Each year, Blessman International leads Central Iowans on a 12-day, all-inclusive experience sharing the heart of Christ with children in South Africa. Teams are forming to do something significant in an African child's life. Learn more at blessmaninternational.org. That's blessmaninternational.org.
Is it time for a new roof? Then it could be time for you to get to know Bell Construction. Bell Construction is a roofing company entering its 30th year of business. They specialize in residential re-roofs, light commercial jobs, and have the experience to meet all of your roofing needs with personal service. With Bell Construction, the owner will come to your home or place of business in person to inspect and ensure the quality of work that you deserve. They pride themselves in working with you on a personal basis and making sure you are satisfied. Bell Construction, 515-963-4494.
Welcome back. I'm Kelly Metro Collins with the Diocese of Des Moines. You're listening to Making It Personal with Bishop Joensen. On today's show, we're visiting with Tom Chapman, Executive Director of the Iowa Catholic Conference, the voice of the bishops of Iowa. We're talking to him about this year's legislative priorities and more.
Good morning, Tom. Thanks for being on the show again. You're kind of a friend of the show in many ways, and in the midst of the legislative season that's heating up, we're grateful that you could make some time with us this morning.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, very good. Well, there's so many topics we could talk about and things, but kind of in a wide-ranging level. And as we think about on this day of the national respect and for all life, particularly the unborn, that sense of the human life to be protected from conception until natural death as a basic requirement. But so much follows from that, and the basic human rights that and the necessities, and how we want to, as Catholic pastors, the four bishops of Iowa, and you're kind of our agent in regard and helping us to get our voice out and the message of the gospel of life that St. John Paul II helped to hold up. But a lot of things here, and obviously the priorities, some are kind of perennial. Others carry over and have a certain urgency as well. So we could go all over, and I'd certainly want to give you the chance to accent anything you'd like to hold up. But as we think about with the pandemic and everything else and the various hybrid models and models of delivery of education, I think our parochial schools certainly shone brightly and continue to do so in the midst of all that. And there's some things afoot with education reform. Could you talk about education savings accounts or anything else going on in the governor and the legislature?
Well, this certainly is something that the governor is making a priority this year. In fact, I think she's going to have a news conference on Monday to talk some more about her education reform bill. But that bill just came out this week, and there's a couple things in particular that we were, I think, pleased to see and really want to highlight. One is a so-called Students First Scholarship, which are similar to what we've been working on for many years, which would be education savings accounts. Mm-hmm. And these scholarships would be available to students who currently attend a so-called failing public school under a federal definition. So that would be about 34 buildings in the state, and those students could get a scholarship to go to a non-public school like a Catholic school. And so it's a small start in terms of what we'd like to see. You know, for sure, we'd like a scholarship to be available to current parents, but it's something that at least would get things going.
Okay, and so to be pro-child in that regard, that not just generally the high level of public education in the state of Iowa, but there are those that are falling short. So it's kind of an acute intervention, if you will, with these student first scholarships. Good, yeah. Anything else in the educational realm, or is that going to be the immediate action item?
Well, I think that's what you're going to hear about Actually, the bill contains a lot of different things. Another piece that we like in there is right now, as many of our parents know, there is a tuition and textbook tax credit that is 25% of the first 1,000 spent on tuition. Well, the governor's proposing that be expanded to 50% of the first 2,000. So basically, that tax credit could go from $250 to $1,000. And that would be very helpful for parents, who send their child to a non-public school. Also would be available to some homeschool parents. And actually, that tax credit is available to public school parents because public school parents often have to pay music and sports fees, things like that. So they can receive the tax credit as well. I think that's a positive positive aspect of what the governor's talking about. There are also some other plans that I think really the public schools are going to have some problems with in terms of the governor wants to make it easier for parents to switch from one public school to another. And in some parts of the state, a lot of the time the school district can say no to that switch. And so the governor wants to open that up, I think. And then there also is a proposal to enable charter schools. We've seen charter schools in a lot of different states. And what that means, it's a public school that does not really have all the rules and policies associated from the state. So it's able to be more nimble in its educational plan. And so that could be a good choice for parents too. We just want to make sure that that kind of opportunity is available to private school parents as well. But this bill has a lot of things. There's going to be a ton of opposition, coming from the public schools and the teachers' unions. And if there's one thing I want to get across is that in terms of what the help for private schools would be, like these Students First scholarships, if you look at what the governor has actually proposed and is anticipating would happen, right now we spend about $5.75 billion on K through 12 education. I think the governor's allocating about $3 million for this program, and so you're talking about 0.0005 of what they're spending.
I was trying to do the math, but you beat me to it, so thank you.
No, I did the math, but it's 5/10,000 of what they're spending on K through 12. So this is not going to destroy the public schools. And I think we should lay to rest, that thing right now.
This is, no way, setting up something that's at the debit of the public schools. And again, the great contribution that the parochial schools make to the common good and the great delivery and the relief, actually, that is there, sparing that burden upon the taxpayers in the state of Iowa and delivering a product that creates well-rounded citizens of integrity. They have a vision of looking out for one's neighbor and the kinds of social justice that we want to continue to instill in our consciousness in our students as they move through our system. The reappearance again, it was something that got a little bit of traction last session, but here we are again, supporting the constitutional amendment on abortion. Last year, January 6th, the 4 Iowa bishops released a statement clarifying that the Constitution does not contain a fundamental right. How are we doing with that? It's a lengthy process, but it takes great patience, but also persistence. Can we take a kind of a pulse on where we are with that?
Well, I think we're in good shape for this session, to be honest. The good news is it's already passed out of the House Judiciary Committee. I anticipate that that's going to come to the floor of the House maybe even as soon as next week. And what we're trying to do is we're trying just to clarify that the state constitution does not contain a fundamental right to an abortion. Unfortunately, the Iowa Supreme Court said that it did, and we're just trying to fix that it does not contain that fundamental right. And so what needs to happen is it needs to pass in this session, both chambers in the same form, and then 2 years from now we have to come back and pass it in the exact same form in both chambers. And once that happens, then it can go to a vote of the people of Iowa. So essentially, the people of Iowa are going to get a chance to say, does our Constitution have a fundamental right to abortion or not? I'm optimistic about getting it through both chambers this year in a good form, and then having a chance to come back in a couple of years and doing it again.
And again, it's not so much something explicitly positive, in introducing something, but calling for neutrality of the Constitution, which when we consider that for 115 years, the Constitution of Iowa is regarded as having proscribed abortion, it would seem that in the 2018 decision is really, discontinuous with that previous decision. So this is just a way to kind of set that right. And the feature that strikes me that maybe hadn't even caught my attention is that if it were to pass both houses of the legislature, there's 2 years waiting period. Is that so that the public kind of bridges over another general election? Is that why that
Yes, that's exactly right. The founders of our Constitution wanted to make it difficult to amend the Constitution, and I would say that probably appropriately so in some ways. Mm-hmm. So what they wanted to do is make sure that there was an election of representatives in between the process. So people would really have a chance to take a look at what the previous legislature did and see if they want more of it. And so that's why you have to come back in 2 years and do it again.
Okay. So in a sense, the people of Iowa have both an indirect and the possibility of a direct weighing in on whether to amend the Constitution in this way. So there's really a kind of a deliberateness to all of this. It can't happen kind of a radical flash movement in this regard. When we think about the continuum of life, then, we also think about, the Iowa has not been a state that has had a legal death penalty, but there is some movement afoot there as well to restore the death penalty. And the four of us Iowa bishops came out recently with a statement on this regard. Where is that going to get traction or not?
Well, it's hard to say how it finally will end up, because I think the people of Iowa will have a lot to say about that. Where it sits right now is it did pass a subcommittee in the Iowa Senate, and it's eligible for consideration by the full Judiciary Committee. I mean, just looking at it, I think there's probably, there's a good chance it could pass that committee. And then I think, definitely you'll be hearing more from the Iowa Catholic Conference and the bishops in terms of an action alert. But I think possibly we'll see that in the next couple of weeks. How that would be seen by the full Senate, we don't know yet. One of the things, we've got a lot of new legislators this year, and so I've taken some time really this week to try to get to some of the new legislators and talk to them about this issue and present the bishop's statement. So it's something, we're really going to have to stay tuned.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I know our statement of this month is available on the websites of the various dioceses as well. But just again, highlighting, and again, Pope Francis, I think in continuity with his predecessors, certainly with the encyclical, The Gospel of Life, Pope John Paul II was also signaling that we are, as a civilization, beyond the point where we would act in vengeance or that we would take life in order to try and offer some kind of restitution, if you will. So the quote of the Catechism, which was revised in 2018, more effective systems of detention have been developed, which ensure the due protection of citizens, but at the same time do not definitively deprive the guilty of the possibility of redemption. Redemption in their own conversion in this life, and hence the death penalty inadmissible, because it is an attack on the inviolability and dignity of every person, and we work for that. Even as we are certainly mindful and sympathetic and want to offer every form of support for victims of violent crime and their families as well. So we're opposing the reinstatement of the death penalty. We're not looking for anything that changes the status quo, in effect, in this regard. I have been away, as you're aware. I've been trying to keep tabs of the recent movement to possibly amend the Iowa Constitution on another front with regard to the right to keep and bear arms, which is obviously a constitutional right for folks. But what's the unique feature of this, and why, as bishops, are we against that?
Well, from our perspective, what is trying to be done in the Iowa Constitution is to make the right to keep and bear arms a fundamental right. It can't be regulated. So it's kind of the flip side of the abortion thing. Mm-hmm. There's an effort to put this in Iowa's Constitution and make it fundamental. I think from the bishop's perspective, and what they've said and what you have said collectively in your own document a couple of years ago, is that weapons are really simply too accessible, and so the right to bear arms should be balanced against the safety and the well-being of society as a whole. And the problem with, once again, having this as a fundamental right in the Constitution is that it can't be regulated. So I think there is a concern that would take away from the possibility of even gun permitting laws, registration, things like that. And really the proponents, that's exactly what they want, because from their perspective, they look at the right to keep and bear arms as protecting all the other rights. And so they see that as very fundamental, and the bishops do not see that as a fundamental thing, with the understanding that people obviously have a right to protect themselves, when necessary. So this is something that I'm very confident in saying it's going to pass both chambers again this year and will be on the ballot probably in 2022 for the people of Iowa to take a look at. So there's a lot of support in the legislature for this right now, and I think it's pretty much we're standing in front of the train on that deal.
Okay. Well, and again, the bishops are not looking to remove people's right to possess and bear arms, but just that we might have some guidelines and trying to protect the larger populace and the ways in which people might gain access to those. And so, again, are we going to instill a new right, just like you made reference to the abortion decision of the Supreme Court in 2018. Is this kind of creating something that is not already present in a way? So I think that's a concern. Lots of other issues, Tom. Are you going to be hopefully willing to hang with us so that the break is coming up in about a minute or so? The Des Moines City Council this past year passed an anti-racial profiling ordinance. There's something going afoot with the larger state. Governor Reynolds has been receptive to similar moves at the statewide level. Is that correct?
Yes, she had a task force that was kind of led up by Lieutenant Governor Adam Gregg to look at those issues. My understanding is that there will be legislation which would deal with racial profiling and clarify that really obviously is against the law and some other data collection provisions. And I think she's going to tie it with a so-called kind of back the blue legislation that would be to protect police and other law enforcement and put more penalties on people who attack them. So I think that's something the bishops will look at very carefully once we see it on paper. But certainly the racial issues are there. We know we have problems with racial justice in our country. We see it in the correction system and we see it in other places. And I know that this is going to be something of interest. And so I think at this point where we're at is let's see what's going to be introduced and then the bishops can take a look at it and see how that
We'll take a brief pause, Tom, and then we'll hopefully come join you after the break again.
Is it time for a new roof? Then it could be time for you to get to know Bell Construction. Bell Construction is a roofing company entering its 30th year of business. They specialize in residential re-roofs, like commercial jobs, and have the experience to meet all of your roofing needs with personal service. With Bell Construction, the owner will come to your home or place of business in person to inspect and ensure the quality of work that you deserve. They pride themselves in working with you on a personal basis and making sure you are satisfied. Bell Construction, 515-963-4494.
What is the best gift ever? Giving a Catholic education is at the top of my list. Your contribution to CTO helps families send their children to our Catholic schools who otherwise could not afford it. In giving to CTO, you receive the best tax credits ever. Pledge or donate online at ctoiowa.org. The bottom line, it's for the kids and their future.
Welcome back. I'm Kelly Mesher-Collins with the Diocese of Des Moines. We are back with Tom Chapman, the Executive Director of the Iowa Catholic Conference.
Just to step away from the actual practical issues we'll revisit in a moment, but how's it working out with people under the pandemic constraints? Are most of the interactions with legislators being remotely through Zoom or other meetings, or how's that being carried out these days, Tom?
Well, that's a great question. Each chamber is doing it a little differently. The Iowa House is having all of its committees online. However, if you want to speak on a bill, you have to be there in person. The Iowa Senate is also having all things available online, but no in person. And the only way you can have that contact with legislators in the committees is to speak online. So they're doing it differently, which I think, is they have a right to do that, but it makes it a little complicated.
You found it right. Even if it's not in the Constitution, they have that right.
Right. Yeah. It's tough to kind of explain it, And so I'm up there every day in person, and I just decided because that I don't want to start deciding when am I going to wear a mask, when is it safe, when is it not. I'm just wearing a mask. It's not political. I'm just wearing a mask, and that's how I do that. And I still have an opportunity to interact with legislators. Although particularly, and this is, it's political, a lot of the Republicans are there in person every day, and a lot of the Democrats are not. So it just changes up on how you contact people, whether by text or email or in person. But I do think it's a positive development that people can view more of the subcommittee meetings where there's discussion on bills online. And there's a lot more already. There's a lot more, I would say, input and interest from people around the state. And that's a positive thing.
Okay. Well, we know our friends with the Spirit Catholic Radio Network in Nebraska with their unicameral legislature have a very different situation, so they don't have the diversity that you have to kind of straddle in that way. But we're appreciative of your efforts on that. We think about, again, the continuum of life and healthcare and things. I think one of the things that we've seen an explosion of teletherapies, which, again, Catholic Charities counselors and many others are using that. We're trying to make healthcare more readily available and affordable, including for immigrants and their children, and so the availability of not only mental health care, but palliative care and hospice service as well, those positive forms of outreach in accord with the kind of Catholic ethic of life there that, again, none of us possesses dominion over our own lives that we could exempt that. Is there any movement with euthanasia or assisted suicide? Sometimes that surfaces. And again, if we're proactive in trying to do these positive means, how is that going to be something that maybe kind of diminishes the movement in that regard?
Well, obviously, that's a great concern for the church in terms of our life efforts. So far, there have not been any bills introduced to bring assisted suicide to Iowa. I do anticipate we'll see something, but I don't think they'll move very fast this year. So it's really about what can we do positively to help people at the end of life. And I think one of the things that the bishops have focused on over the years is to make sure people look at having some advanced directives and not necessarily putting every instance on paper, but really finding the people you trust and making sure there's a document that the people you trust can help make those decisions for you. You know, obviously I've done that. I think that's a good practice for everybody to do that, because you want people you trust being able to make those tough decisions. Because, you know, sometimes people think, well, I don't want to be hooked up to machines until I die. Well, you don't have to be. That's not necessarily good care at the end of your life. If you're in the dying process, you know, you can make sure that you're not hooked up to all those things and you're feeling relatively pain-free. It's one of the interesting things. Even during my time at the Iowa Catholic Conference, medicine has advanced a lot if you talk to doctors in terms of keeping people comfortable at the end of life, people not having to suffer, and that's a very rare instance these days if they're getting good care.
Amen. And again, you're so conversant with these life issues and how it touches in so many different ways. And so, yeah, I think a friendly reminder to me as well to look at my own kind of healthcare proxy and instructions in that. We did that with all our clergy in the Des Moines Diocese, and we certainly encourage people to have those conversations. So, Tom, thank you very much. I throw it back to Kelly here.
Thanks, Tom. This has been another edition of Making It Personal with Bishop Joensen. Thank you to our guests and all of our listeners in Iowa, Nebraska, and Wisconsin on Iowa Catholic Radio and the Spirit Catholic Radio Network.
You can hear Making It Personal with Bishop William Joensen every week on Iowa Catholic Radio and iowacatholicradio.com.